Outputting our coverage. It's what we do.
That's all we do every Thursday
At 5:30. College football.
College football.
Mountain West Conference.
Doesn't matter.
SEC
Is all that matters.
Nick Saban.
Is crazy.
Yeah.
And that's all. Let's start
Good
the show.
evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in to another exciting edition of Outputting Our Coverage. Took our bye week last week. Feels pretty good. Feeling refreshed. Still kind of have a nagging vocal cord injury that I'm just trying to...
You just got to work through it.
Day by day, really, is the best way to describe it. But, they're...
Well, you were listed as probable for the show, so I'm glad
Right.
you played through it.
Right, and you took me into the closet and shot me up with some mysterious liquid, and I feel way better now.
You're not supposed to talk about that.
It's incredible. Just like Billy bobbing it all over the place here.
Oh,
so.
Yeah, I would
that's
talk about that.
That's an underrated movie, by the way.
That is an underrated
We were
movie.
talking underrated movies before the show. I said Waterboy is an underrated movie. David says, not so fast, my friend. Have you watched it recently? I said no.
It's more of a nostalgia film.
I thought it was some of Adam Sandler's finest work. I don't know.
I'm still a Happy Gilmore guy.
There are many times during my life when I just say to myself, if I feel like I can't accomplish something, I say in my head, like I think back to that locker room speech during halftime when, they're all sharing their memories of Bobby Boucher, and then he just bursts through the door and says, "You guys remember that time that Bobby Boucher showed up at halftime and the Mud Dogs won the Bourbon Bowl?" And it just gets me so pumped up, David.
See, when I'm in that
So
same
pumped.
situation, I also think back to Waterboy, but I think back to the water sucks.
Yeah.
It really...
You gotta stay hydrated.
Yeah.
It's global warming is happening, so it's that much more important to stay hydrated.
That is true.
At all times.
Yeah. That's 2 good minutes on Adam Sandler.
That's impressive,
Yeah.
how we were able to do that. Anyway, let's jump into some actual football-related news. We knew this would happen, David. We're talking about 4 undefeated teams. There's actually more than that, but 4 that were really in the hunt.
Yeah. We're waiting for the first domino to drop.
We knew it would happen, and just right on cue, Stanford takes down Oregon last Thursday in an unbelievably good night of Thursday evening football, way better than normal.
With Baylor and Oklahoma
Baylor
also
also destroying Oklahoma. Baylor's an interesting case. We'll get to that in a minute, but Oregon getting snake bit by Stanford again for the second year in a row.
Should we be surprised? Should we even call it snake bit?
Yeah,
I mean, Stanford seems to have their number.
Yeah, you could say, I don't know if this is fair or not, that anytime Oregon has had to play a team that can control the line of scrimmage, they just can't do it.
Yeah,
I mean,
I completely
especially a controlling defensive line. Oregon is so built on just gassing you, just running so quickly. But if you have a disruptive defensive line, you get them out of their rhythm, and then it's like night and day. There's no middle ground with them.
And the way that teams are doing it is superior defensive line, athlete, and size. Oregon recruits and only uses small offensive linemen who can get up and down the field and run 70 to 80 plays.
Right.
You're not going to be able to push around a 350-pound lineman.
Right. So Stanford, of course, running off of that pseudo SEC formula. Just a terrible matchup for Oregon and Stanford. Man, are you kicking yourself right now that you lost to Utah?
Yeah.
Otherwise,
You're number 2.
Well, I don't know. Are you?
They're number 2.
You think strength of schedule wise? You think they are?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Oregon certainly seems like a bad loss, or Utah seems like a bad loss for
Definitely.
Stanford. I don't think they're going to be able to overcome that unless just some chaos breaks out. And we'll talk about chaos scenarios here later in the show if we have time. But at this point, you still have Alabama at number 1. Florida State has looked pretty convincing. I think they're basically the clear-cut number 2 right now.
Yes, definitely.
You still got Ohio State hanging around. They really don't have any more challenges this year. Michigan was pretty much the only challenge, and Michigan's falling apart. So I don't think – I'm pretty sure Ohio State is going to go 24-0 in the past 2 years.
And missed 2 national championship
Yeah, which
games.
is pretty crazy and also kind of awesome if you don't like Urban Meyer.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
I don't like Ohio State, so I think it's the perfect storm.
It's kind of funny. But Baylor. What do you do with Baylor if they win all their games, David?
if Baylor wins all their games and wins the Big 12 championship,
It's feasible. It's not crazy to think that could happen.
It's feasible. They've got a real argument, but I think their problem is Florida State in front. If Florida State also goes undefeated and wins an ACC championship, I don't think that Baylor can jump them.
But don't you think that the Big 12 is probably stronger than the ACC, so that Baylor's schedule strength will be stronger?
This year, I don't really know. Oklahoma has not really impressed me.
Okay, you're right. Oklahoma not that great. Texas
has
not
had their
not that
problems,
great.
but they're getting better. Oklahoma State is Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Right. Texas Tech,
they look great early and they faded. TCU is not the same TCU team.
Okay.
Kansas, Iowa State, Kansas State, all down this year.
But what about the ACC? I mean, you got Florida State, Clemson. And then Duke,
Miami.
Yeah, Miami.
Who's also starting to fade. Duke is a really surprising team right now.
But if you got to say Duke is a good team in your conference, and your conference isn't that good, David.
Virginia Tech has turned it on as of late.
I just don't know. I don't know which conference is actually stronger there.
I think that's a tough argument. I think they're both kind of bad in the middle.
Yeah.
You know, they got pretty good teams on top.
I bet Baylor drops one, though. I just got a feeling.
Right, I was about to say that. I think Baylor's going to clear up this situation.
Probably not this week. We'll talk about that in the pick'em. But I don't think it'll be this week. But
they got a rough road.
They got to play Texas still. They got to play
at Okie State.
Yeah, at TCU. That's still certainly not a gimme. I mean,
right. And then home against Texas. That might be their hardest game.
Yeah. So certainly some interesting scenarios that could play out here over the next couple of weeks. Florida State, we mentioned, is a clear-cut number 2, but just about right on cue. Major scandal. Maybe major scandal. Scandal.
Yeah.
With a lowercase s at this point. Breaking about Jameis Winston, the star quarterback for Florida State, who's just come out to captivate the nation. I don't know a whole lot of details on this one. I know that there's some sexual assault allegations that apparently took place
in the middle of 2012.
Yeah, a while back. I saw some reports today that maybe they were covered up by police, and now they're coming to the Attorney General's office. It's hard to know what to make of this story at this point. I mean,
I don't think we can say anything until we get some more information.
It's kind of anything would be speculation at this point. However, I just want to say this, David. It's just uncanny how the timing of these things take place sometimes.
I know. I mean, do you think that this story still comes out and breaks today if Florida State is 4-4?
No, it doesn't. I mean, the Cam Newton story broke this exact same week,
right,
in 2010. I just want to say kudos to those Alabama boosters. They were only able to get one player in 2010. This year, they were almost took down Johnny Manziel and Jameis Winston. That's just impressive. And that's my troll of the day right there.
That's maybe your worst troll of all time because why in the world would they take down Jameis Winston in Florida State?
I did see some people say that today. I thought it was funny. I mean, I don't know. Have you ever listened to Feinbaum, David? You ever listen to that show?
They had it on. They had it on in the warehouse one day. It was awful. I hate those callers.
I would not put it past some of the people on Feinbaum to orchestrate something like this.
Well, they had one who poisoned some trees.
There's some pretty crazy people on there. You know, I wouldn't put it past. There's some people on there that said something to the effect of, you know, I'm gonna burn down the Heisman ceremony if A.J. McCarron's not a finalist. I mean, if you get Jameis Winston out of the way, A.J. McCarron might be a finalist then.
I still don't get the A.J. McCarron argument.
I don't either. He's okay. Look, A.J. McCarron, you can't argue with his record. I mean, it's ridiculous.
But that's not A.J. McCarron.
Yeah.
That's the Alabama Crimson Tide.
It's a team. He does what he's asked to do. But
I mean, he went 10 of 24 in one game this year.
The best litmus test here is if you're starting a team from scratch and you have a choice between Johnny Manziel and A.J. McCarron.
Whoa, redefine. College or pro?
We're talking college here.
Okay.
We're talking the Heisman. So you're starting a college team from scratch. Who are you going to pick? Johnny Manziel or A.J. McCarron? Yeah.
Johnny Manziel. I'll take the off-the-field incident.
Right.
I'll even take that he's only going to be there for 3 years.
And to me, that should be the ultimate litmus test here. It should not be about record. It's not a lifetime achievement award.
I tell you what, I take Jameis Winston.
Okay, that's fine.
Now.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. But I'm just saying the way the Heisman should be picked is if you're picking teams in gym class, which guy's getting picked first? That should be your Heisman winner.
Well, that's true, but that also completely eliminates any defensive player, probably running backs nowadays.
But that's kind of where we
wide
are.
receivers.
So
yeah, I guess
I don't know.
they're all flawed systems. We might as well have one of our own.
Yeah, I mean they should just change the Heisman criteria to the best quarterback. Really, just the best quarterback
On a winning team at some point.
because it's really hardly ever been a halfback, or I guess the last running back was probably Mark Ingram.
Yeah,
right?
Brian Perry for Baylor.
Yeah.
Making a real good case.
Yeah, he is, but for some reason he's not getting that much hype. I don't know why.
I think it's because everybody thinks Baylor's about to lose one, and
Yeah.
the moment they do, they're out of everybody's
just
mind.
don't want to look bad.
Yeah.
I see how it is.
Now, we got to talk about this guy from Ohio State,
Okay.
this player. Urban Meyer got really upset. at
Yeah,
his-
Urban Meyer kind of a serial overreactor.
he is, except for
Okay.
when it comes to people that he might have coached that might have committed murder.
Well, that's
He didn't
true.
seem to get really upset
Also
about that.
serial sweeper under the rugger.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so I think it was a defensive back for Ohio State.
I'm not sure what position he played.
Came out this week in an interview and said that Ohio State would wipe the floor with both Alabama and Florida State.
That's just dumb. It's just dumb.
What was he thinking?
I mean, did he ever watch any of the BCS games that Ohio State played against SEC competition?
At this point, I think he's just trying to get it where the entire country hates Ohio State so much that they just put them in just to get reamed again. It's like they have to be reminded every couple years.
I don't know. It must be the cold up there. It's starting to get cold. People are getting a little bit crazy. You know, the snow starts falling.
Yeah. I mean,
People's inhibitions start falling. That's got to be it.
what are they thinking? Ohio State.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's just shameful.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break. We'll be back on the other side. We got plenty of stuff to talk about with Auburn and Alabama. Big games looming on the horizon. We'll review what happened this past weekend, preview what's coming ahead. You definitely don't want to miss it. So stick around. We'll be right back on the other side of outputting our coverage.
It's time for SEC preview. SEC Big 10, Big 12, 12 can't count. SEC college football robber barons. SEC, yeah, they're big, they're fast, they're strong. And Missouri and Texas A&M as well. Yeah, SEC preview. Here we go.
All right. We are back
SEC preview.
here on outputting our coverage. David, let's review what happened last weekend.
Football was played.
Football was played in the Southeastern Conference. Specifically, two teams from the state of Alabama engaged in football contests. Which one do you want to start with? Let's start with Auburn, Tennessee. Alabama LSU was this week's game of the century, so we'll save that for last.
I agree.
Auburn, Tennessee, as it's kind of been for the past couple weeks, a lot of the national folks have been picking against Auburn repeatedly.
Who picked Tennessee in this game? Nobody in the country picked Tennessee, did they?
There's a couple folks who picked Tennessee.
No.
A couple national folks.
No, they did
Brando.
not.
Tim Brando picked Tennessee.
Well,
win.
you can't listen to what Tim Brando says.
So
that's just dumb. I'm
just,
sorry.
I agree with you. I'm not gonna argue with you there. Anyway, it unfolded pretty similarly to the Arkansas game. Tennessee made it interesting for the first little bit, but then Auburn basically just ran wherever they wanted to.
Which is what happens with a good running team. You wear a team down.
Sure, and really not a perfect game by any means. Nick Marshall had a pretty ugly pick six, and this kind of leads us into a discussion we'll hopefully have a little bit later in the show about Auburn's passing abilities. But just kind of strictly looking at the Tennessee game here, it's a pretty impressive SEC road win. I mean,
definitely.
They won the way they were supposed to win,
Yeah.
and that's got to be a very positive sign for Auburn fans.
And you know what? Marshall made up for that interception by just happening to run for 240 yards.
Right, which is the best individual rushing performance of anyone in the SEC this year.
Yeah.
Running back or quarterback.
So I think he did all right.
Yeah, I think
he made up for that one.
done pretty well. Defensively, Auburn allowed way more rush yards than they wanted to.
No, definitely.
And that's kind of been a concern all year, but once again,
That's what happens when you run the 4.25.
yeah, between the 20s, Auburn's kind of loose, but once you get in the red zone, Auburn has really clamped down.
Just tightens up.
And it's not necessarily well, let me put it this way, it's kind of a gut-wrenching thing to watch,
Right,
but
right.
it works. I guess
you can really only have that defense and be confident about it when you have the kind of offense that you're putting out on the other side.
Right, yeah, and that's if Auburn runs into a situation where they can't score quickly, things can start to snowball. And we've seen that before. I remember that from past seasons. If you're trying to play that bend, don't break defense, but you can't score, it doesn't work.
Or LSU. I mean, at halftime, they really turned around, and they played a really good game at the second half, but they were too far behind.
Sure. So it can get you into some holes, that's for sure. But, I'd say over the past 2 weeks, Arkansas and Tennessee, it doesn't matter who the opponents are, getting impressive SEC road wins, it's not easy to do against anybody.
No,
league,
you can't.
So.
Yeah, you can't knock what they've done. They've done a really good job to keep it with only one loss in that column.
Sure. So a big matchup coming up for Auburn this week against Georgia.
A down Georgia team this year.
A down Georgia team that has Gurley back. He's probably not 100% at this point, but
right.
Did look pretty good against Appalachian State last week. Granted, it's Appalachian State, so anybody's going to look pretty good there. But I think Georgia's going to run for some yards on Auburn. That's a given. Gurley is he's going to score some touchdowns. Aaron Murray is going to throw some touchdowns. The big question to me is Georgia's defense.
Yeah, I don't think they can stop Auburn.
Yeah,
I think it might be another Tennessee type defensive performance. I mean, you could see Auburn put up a ton of points.
Right.
Georgia is decimated on the defensive side of the ball, and they've got tons of freshmen out there.
And at wide receiver as well. Most of
right.
Georgia's wide receiving core is hurt. Aaron Murray, certainly a guy that if you can get pressure on him, he's prone to mistakes. He's thrown a lot of interceptions. That'll be a key, I think, as well. Can Auburn's defensive line get some pressure at times, like the Ole Miss game? Auburn has gotten a lot of pressure. At other times, they've gotten none. So
if I put the number at half, would you go over or under on how many interceptions Threezy has?
Half?
Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay, I see what you did there.
That's right.
Yeah. So just Threezy, not any defensive back.
He's got a nose for the ball.
He does. I'd probably go over.
Okay.
I mean, if anybody's going to get one, it's probably going to be him.
We'll have to take a look at that next week.
We'll see what happens. That's a tough question.
That is a neat
get
one.
Put on the spot there, but at the end of the day, this is you could say maybe Auburn's looking ahead to Alabama. I don't see that. They remember that Georgia has outscored them like 84-7 over the past 2 years. That's not something you forget.
And why would you look ahead when you have a bye week before Alabama?
Right. I mean, it's a huge home game. And that's something that's kind of overlooked here as well. Auburn gets Georgia 2 years in a row at home, which is very unusual.
It is.
You got to take advantage of that while you've got it. I don't see Auburn losing this game, David.
I don't either. I think Auburn wins, and I think they cover the 4.5.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens there. Certainly a big game against Alabama coming up. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the show. We'll make you stick around for that one. But speaking of Alabama, big game for them against LSU this past week.
Oh, yeah.
That's been a game that's basically determined the winner of the West for the past couple of years.
It is easily the annual game of the century.
Yeah. The annual weekly game of the century.
That's right.
Or of the minute, or whatever denomination we're in at this point.
Right.
LSU had a chance early. They kind of caught Alabama off guard a little bit.
I don't know that it was that, but they smashed them in the mouth. I mean, they were very physical.
Yeah, and LSU's got some running backs who can do that. The J.C. Copeland fumble.
That was terrible.
That was it. I saw that. At that point, I knew they weren't going to win the game. They hung around for a while, but
I don't know.
It wasn't going to happen.
They kept answering Alabama's bell. Alabama would go make a play. LSU came right back for a while. I thought LSU was very much in this game until about midway in the third quarter.
Yeah, they just didn't quite have enough to get it done. Mettenberger took some hits.
Oh,
for sure.
Especially at the end. I mean, he took 4 straight sacks.
LSU's just not as good of a team this year as they've been in years past. They're still a decent team, but at the end of the day, I never really thought they had a realistic shot in that game.
I thought they could because they typically play the best game they play all year against Alabama, or at least the first time they play Alabama in a year. I really thought that they play a little bit better. I like their offense. I think their offense is really balanced, but for some reason they just can't put points on the board.
Yeah, and certainly I think Les Miles called a better game this year. They showed some flashbacks to last year's game with some of the fake field goals and punts, and that was some stupid stuff. But,
although the fake came from Saban's
how about that, right? That was a little bit interesting. They actually called a timeout beforehand and then ran it.
Now they called a timeout because a guy didn't get on the field. They were about to punt the ball away.
Yeah,
because
they changed their mind.
So kudos to them. It's a really ballsy move. I mean, if you miss it, that's the game. If you make it,
Saban not one to gamble like that normally.
Also, not one to smile. Did you see him jump into McCarron's arms?
A little unsettling for me. I wasn't quite sure how to react to that.
Because, I freaked out. Yeah. I screamed a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if you just think back to the arc that Nick Saban and A.J. McCarron's relationship has taken. The first time we were ever really introduced to A.J. McCarron, Nick Saban was slapping him on the behind.
And screaming in his face.
And here we are now, Nick Saban jumping into his arms. It's just a beautiful love story, David.
It's a little Brokeback-ish.
It's a little weird, but it's a beautiful story. And
it's just terrifying to see Saban smile at all.
Yeah, he's really kind of softened up this year. It's kind of weird. He's kind of taking a Spurrier-esque... Well,
I mean, that's true.
Not like exactly the same, but Spurrier really softened up.
Yeah, he doesn't talk as much as Spurrier.
No, definitely not. But just in terms of, being hated by other SEC fan bases, Spurrier was that guy.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Time. And Saban's still kind of that guy now, but I don't know. I mean, when he does stuff like that, it's a little bit harder to dislike him. I mean, he's smiling now. He's having fun.
I dislike him more now because that creeped me out.
Yeah.
But you got to give it to Alabama. They really hung around. Tie game at 17-all, and then they just absolutely imposed their will on LSU. They just smashed the ball down their throat.
I will say this, the Alabama team has improved tremendously as the year has gone on. I mean, if you look back to the first two games, Virginia Tech and Texas A&M, that's not even close to the same team that they've got right now.
If you showed me those two films, and that's all I had to go off of, I'd say Alabama would have lost 2 games by this point.
Right. So, certainly a team that's looking good. They go to Mississippi State this week.
Not a problem.
Not really an issue there, I don't think. So you got at Mississippi State this week, then Chattanooga at home, a little tune-up, and then, of course, the Iron Bowl, which David and I had some interesting conversations about that this week. We'll talk a little bit about our thoughts there later on in the show. But before we do that, let's talk about some other SEC games, David. There's still some races to be decided over in the East. Let's start with a team that is completely self-destructed. Florida going to Columbia to play South Carolina. Before we get into the game, what's going on at Florida, David? What's happening there?
I think the same thing that you saw happen at the end of last year. I mean, do you remember Florida was supposed to be this big team who got gypped, who now had to play Louisville, and that's why they just kind of gave up and didn't play? You're starting to see the same give up in this Florida team now.
Yeah.
I think that's an institutional thing. You got to rearrange the hierarchy there.
Yeah, there's a lot of folks saying that Will Muschamp is safe. The defensive guys are all safe. They just need to make an offensive change. They've done that pretty much every year for the past couple of years. It hasn't helped.
Right. I think the problem is Muschamp.
Yeah, which is kind of strange. I mean, maybe if you look at it this way, Muschamp, Gene Chizik, both former Auburn defensive coordinators, maybe the game has just kind of passed them by. They weren't able to update to the new type of offenses. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that, but I really think Florida, you made the wrong choice in getting Muschamp over Strong. I would try. I'd try to fix that.
Oh yeah,
I mean, you're the Florida Gators. You open up the checkbook and you pay what he asks.
Yeah. I think that's an obvious choice. That's who you got to go after, and I don't think it'll happen.
I don't either. And one of the reasons is, and I know everybody tells me I'm crazy, Charlie Strong likes it in Louisville.
Yeah.
I don't see him moving this year.
Well, let's think about this, though, David. All right, Florida's 4-5 right now. Who do they still have left on the schedule? They got South Carolina this week.
Florida
go ahead and say that's a loss.
Yeah, I think so, too. Presbyterian.
That's a win. We'll give them that.
And Florida State.
This could probably be one of the worst losses to Florida State that Florida will ever have. Or has ever had.
It could, although you could flip it around and say, you know what, if this Florida team has not given up, what better way to rejuvenate the fan base than to win one of these two games?
Yeah,
South Carolina or Florida State.
Maybe.
I don't think it's going to happen, But we've seen crazier things happen.
That's true.
I mean, Vandy has looked down and out, only won 2 games in a whole year, and then go and beat a good Tennessee team.
That's true.
So,
but I don't think Florida's going to beat Florida State this year. I think they're going to
No,
get
I don't
drubbed.
either.
And depending on how bad the drubbing is, maybe you could see Muschamp get fired from that if people are just so upset from it. But I don't think it's going to happen.
yeah, I think if you're a Florida fan, you want to see him gone.
Yeah.
If you want to see any change, you want to see him gone.
Yeah, but anyway, South Carolina definitely going to win this week. I don't think there's any question there. And of course, every time I say something like that, it usually goes the other way. But
Right.
I don't think that's going to happen this week. Vanderbilt and Kentucky also going in the East there. Vandy at 5-4, coming off of that first time they'd won in the Swamp since like the 60s or something. It's been forever.
Yeah, it was the first time in 40 years that they have beaten Florida and Georgia in the same year.
So pretty good year for James Franklin. They've still got Kentucky this week. I think we can call that a win. They got to go to Tennessee.
I think that's a win, though.
I
Tennessee's
think it
down,
is too.
yeah.
Yeah, and then Wake Forest, so
Which
that's
is
a win.
also a W.
So
Yeah.
you got 3 more wins. Vandy is getting 8 wins again this year. That is darn impressive, David.
And how in the world would James Franklin still be in Vandy if that happened?
I don't know, unless Vandy has... I know Vandy has a lot of money.
Yeah,
And
but they're not putting it in athletics typically.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think he's there after this year.
I don't either.
I mean, his stock is never going to be higher than right now. Never. I mean, he
but-
can only go down from here at
But
Vandy.
he couldn't get like a Texas or USC job. I don't think he's that high profile yet.
No, but
You
think
think
about
he could
this.
get a Louisville if Charlie Strong left?
Oh, yeah. Well, here's the thing. Whoever takes the Texas or USC job,
They're open.
I think that could be open.
That's true. He could get that tier.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that would be a step up for him.
Yeah, I agree.
For sure. So, all right. So the East at this point, you've basically got South Carolina and Missouri.
Right.
I believe Missouri has the week off this week,
They do.
but they took care of business. They played
Kentucky.
last
Yeah,
week.
they played
Okay, so
Kentucky.
they still got to go to Ole Miss. Certainly not a gimme.
It's not,
And then they have Texas A&M at home.
which I think they lose. I mean, I think that's an automatic loss.
Maybe. I'm not sure at this point. I don't know.
Look, A&M's defense is horrendous. We all agree with that. If Manziel's healthy, you're not winning that game. Missouri's
Yeah.
defense is not good enough to carry that game.
I don't know. Missouri has a pretty good defensive line.
They do, but Manziel scores at least 40 points every time he steps on the field.
Yeah, I don't know. I see what you're saying,
I mean,
but I'm not
Auburn-
willing to concede that one.
Auburn played a good defensive game and got scored 48 on.
Yeah.
Alabama is the best, is maybe the best defense in the SEC, and they let up 42 points.
No, I agree, but I think Missouri can score some points as well.
No, I completely agree.
They could maybe win a shootout there.
But so could, I don't know. I don't think
I'm just
so.
saying it could happen.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it will. I don't think it's a definite loss, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see them winning that one. I think this is South Carolina's to lose. Although they still got a tough game. I mean, they got Florida, Coastal Carolina, and then Clemson.
Yeah. Of course, Clemson doesn't count.
It doesn't count. If
So
they
really-
win this game,
So really, at this point, if they beat Florida, then it's basically up to Missouri.
yeah.
So
I think South Carolina's got it.
So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Elsewhere in the SEC,
Not a whole lot going on
not
this
a
week.
yeah.
I mean, we
thought
got
there
a
was
lot
another
of
game, but that's it.
No, you got a lot of bye weeks.
Yeah.
Just not a lot of teams playing.
Okay, that's fine though, because we have other teams that are playing.
We do.
Let's take a quick break, and we're going to go through the Pick 10 standings. Things are kind of coming down to the wire here. Everybody was pretty consistent this week, setting up some big weeks ahead here. So stick around. We'll be right back. We'll talk about that, talk about some other games in the Pick 10, and don't forget, Dave and I are talking Iron Bowl end of the show.
That's right.
Stick around for that. We'll be right back on Outputting Our Coverage.
Hello. Hi. Do you want to go to a party with me? No. The game's on. Oh, I almost forgot. I'll be right there.
We like sports and we don't care who knows. From shooting hoops to the Super Bowl. We like sports and we don't care who knows. Football, tennis, hockey, golf. The game is starting. Everyone is...
All right, we're back. You're on Outputting Our Coverage. A little throwback there. Throwback theme music.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a while.
I like
Ever
it.
since we got our personalized intro, we don't have to use that anymore.
That's
but
right.
It's kind of an autobiographical...
It's a
theme
throwback.
song.
It's a throwback to us.
Yeah. Yeah, we do like sports, and we really don't care who knows.
I don't care.
So, let's talk standings, David.
All right.
This past week, I don't think we had no 10-0s this week.
Which was surprising, but we
Yeah.
had a whole crap ton of 8-2s.
Yeah, pretty consistent for everyone this week.
Yeah, we had about 8-2s. It looks like almost everybody else went 7-3, and then I went 6-4, obviously. And then 2 people finished under me at 5-5. So
Right.
I think the more interesting storyline is on the season. We still have a moobs boobs fight at the top.
It's just crazy.
84 and 83 wins apiece. But then Big Dog is coming in.
Yeah.
He's only one game off with 82 wins, so one big week could get him up there. And Andy, you're not out of it. Only 4 games out at 80 wins.
It's getting tougher. There's not much time left.
Yeah, we got Saban fluffs his hair like a girl, so I don't know that he's changed that one this week, but he's there with 79. And then I am still taking
Mathematically eliminated.
Yeah, I'm
basically,
still
at this
taking
point.
up 17th place with
Yeah.
66 and 44. I am 4 games off of the next group in front of me. I don't even think I'm going to catch them. So
It's okay,
I'm just
David.
I'm just waiting for bowl season. Y'all just wait.
Yeah, it's a new game then.
It is a new game then.
Certainly some important games then to pick this week, and let's talk about some of those. We mentioned Baylor already. They've got Texas Tech this week. Texas Tech looked like a much better matchup for them until they lost 3 straight games.
Right.
Starting at Oklahoma, which is not a particularly good loss, then Oklahoma State, and last week Kansas State. Not a
State.
team you
That
should be
would-
losing
no,
to
that
this
would
year.
hurt.
So,
And they get them at home.
yeah, I'm saying that Baylor. The spread is 27.5, so I would say they cover.
I don't know. I would pick against the cover on the spread, but I still think Baylor's going to win
Yeah.
handily.
Yeah, actually pretty tough finding some good games for the Big Ten this week, David.
Yeah.
Outside of the couple decent matchups, there's not a whole lot.
It's
going
kind of
on.
when big teams start skipping through the schedule, waiting for.
Right.
A lot of them have big last games.
Right. So we're seeing that this week. We got a game tonight, a pretty decent one. Georgia Tech and Clemson. Georgia Tech flying under the radar this year, but their 3 losses are not terrible ones.
No,
Virginia Tech,
by 7.
yeah. Miami, yeah, okay. I mean, Miami
They
was
were rolling people at the time.
they were a top 10 team at one point, and at BYU.
by 18. That one kind of hurts.
Hurts a little bit.
But then 56-0 against Syracuse.
Yeah.
21-10 against Pitt. I mean,
They've had some good wins.
They have.
To me, this is certainly not a guarantee for Clemson, but it is at Clemson. I don't think Georgia Tech has quite enough to take down Clemson. Do you?
No, I agree. 10.5. I think that's kind of mild. I think Clemson probably wins by a little bit more.
Yeah. So that one's coming up here shortly this evening. The Miami team we talked about that was riding high, playing Duke this week.
A 7-2 Duke team.
Duke's already bowl eligible, which 2 years in a row, first time that's happened since like the 1800s. Duke, their only losses this year to Georgia Tech, as we mentioned, and to Pitt.
by 3.
Yeah.
So that one was a shootout, 58-55. But then they beat Troy. They trounced Navy, who's a pretty good team this year. Beat Virginia, squeaked by Virginia Tech by 3, and then beat North Carolina State by 18.
Yeah, I mean, those are okay, but that's not
Not-
really that impressive
not
of
impressive,
victories.
Miami's kind of slumping now. I mean, got bloodied by Florida State 41-14, and then got beat by Virginia Tech 42-24.
Right, and Miami has some injury issues as well. But that being said, I'm still going to take Miami here.
I'm taking Duke at home. I'm taking the
I don't know.
Dukies.
I don't know about that.
That's fine.
We'll see.
I think. Well, here's my kiss of death. I think the only other time I took Duke to win was against Georgia Tech when they lost 38-14.
Yeah.
So
You still have time to reevaluate that one if you want.
no, I'm taking Duke. That's
Okay.
that's
We'll let you stick with that.
that's steady.
All right, Michigan State and Nebraska.
Your favorite defense?
Michigan, yeah, I haven't really been able to declare my love too much for Michigan State's defenses this year just because I've been cautiously optimistic. But, at this point, you can say Michigan State could be the team that could take down Ohio State in the Big Ten championship.
Man, I hope so.
That is still possible.
It is.
Michigan State's only lost to Notre Dame, a close one. Notre Dame not nearly the team they were last year, but And, at that point, Michigan State was still trying to figure out some of their offensive issues. Things have improved since then.
They're actually putting up points in the last couple games.
They have gotten some things figured out. Nebraska is still a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde team. You don't know what you're going to get week to week.
And they've figured out a way to win on these crazy plays at the end of games.
Right.
So only won by 3 against a bad Northwestern team and won by 4 against a bad Michigan team.
Yeah, that doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. I would say Michigan State for sure there.
I'm going to take Michigan State, but I will warn those of you who might want something else to think about this game. It has been 2 straight years that Nebraska has shocked Michigan State and won at the last second.
Yeah,
2 straight years.
That's true.
So just keep that in the back of your mind.
It's a Stanford-Oregon scenario there.
It is.
Could be. Speaking of Stanford, they're going to USC, the one in Los Angeles.
Right.
Game day is actually going to be at USC. You would not have guessed that a couple weeks ago when Lane Kiffin was getting fired. That's great for USC. Ed Orgeron, happy story, giving linemen some cookies and stuff, but you're not going to win this one.
No. They don't have the horses to keep up with Stanford.
The line is actually only 3.5 in favor of Stanford, which seems crazy to me. If I were a betting man, I would definitely take that, but I think Stanford is just going to physical the crap out of USC, and that's just not happening.
And make USC like it. I mean, USC coming in played Cal and put up a bunch of points, but everybody's put up a bunch of points on Cal.
That's not going to happen there.
I'm taking Stanford.
All right, and finally in the Big 12, Oklahoma State, the original Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde team, copyright David Tutwiler, playing Texas, at Texas.
I can't call the Big 12. I don't know what they're doing. You get Oklahoma State, supposed to be this powerful offense, only scores 24 against TCU in a win. They only score 21 against West Virginia in a loss. And then they turn right around and they score 58, 52, and 42 in the next 3 weeks. Granted, it's against Iowa State, Texas Tech, and Kansas. I give up on the Big 12. I don't know how to call them.
I don't know. I figure at this point, Texas has gotten they've strung together some wins.
A double overtime win against West Virginia last week.
The competition has not been great. If you remember back earlier in the year, Texas defense was really struggling. Oklahoma State, not a team you want to play if you're apt to defensive struggles.
No.
I think it's, at this point, everybody's talking about Mac Brown getting fired. They're 7-2 right now, but there's a reason we're talking about Mac Brown getting fired. It's because he's going to be 7-3 after this week, and probably 8-4 at the end of the season. And
this was the perfect season for them to go undefeated.
Right, so I'm going to go Oklahoma State here.
Yeah, I think I'm also going to go with Oklahoma State, but I don't feel confident with it. How about that?
Okay, that's fine. I can deal with that. I'm okay with that. The thing I don't know that I can deal with is how excited our listeners are that we're about to talk about the Iron Bowl.
I'm so excited that we have time to talk about it. We have about 8 minutes left.
Okay,
and I told
plenty
you,
of time.
I told you before the show that I have a secret document I was going to let you see until the show.
Oh, okay, here we go. This is happening on almost live radio.
That's right. This is from auburntigers.com.
Okay.
Football statistics.
That seems like a pretty reputable website.
It's so reputable, it just kills you.
Okay.
So what we're going to look at real quick is going to look at the opponent's statistics against Auburn, and that's how I'm going to make my case.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and update the listeners on some of the conversation that we've had?
Okay, we'll talk about the conversations that we've had here. Basically, we exchanged some text messages earlier this week to the effect of how you were asking me, did I still think that Auburn, not that they could beat Alabama, but that it could be a competitive game, correct?
And the reason that I asked is because when I saw the Tennessee score and I saw the rushing yards, I knew that most Auburn fans' eyes are going to bulge, and I was just wondering where you were.
Okay, and that's fair. That's fair. And kind of the argument I've heard from you and some other folks this week is that there may be some potential concerns about Auburn's ability to throw the football based on the amount that they've been rushing recently.
I think real concerns, if you look at two things. One, the amount they've been rushing recently.
Okay.
Two, how they threw previous to when they had these couple weeks. I mean, it was bad, their passing game, and how they've been effective in throwing the ball in the last couple weeks, which has also been bad.
Okay. I will say this. Number one, when you're playing Arkansas and Tennessee and the rush is working and you're scoring at will, there's no reason to pass the ball. The only 3 things happen when you pass, and 2 of them are bad.
But that's late in the game.
Okay.
You should work the pass in early.
But
so
what
that
if you don't
can
need
get
to?
work?
You don't need to.
It's not neat. You need to do it because that's short-sighted. That's in that game. You're trying to win the season. I mean,
I disagree. You're trying to win each week.
You are trying to win each week. But if you're up by 10, 14 against Tennessee, and their defense cannot stop you.
But if you're up by 14 and you throw an interception for a touchdown, then you're only up by 7.
Which is right.
So that seems risky to me. I would not pass for the sake of practice.
Okay.
That's what practice is for.
Which is fine. But we'll look at the passing later. This is something that I think is an even a bigger issue if you're an Auburn fan. The defense.
Okay.
The experimental 4-2-5 we've gone over several times. Terrible between the 20s, really strong inside the 20s. However, one of the things we have not talked about a lot that I think we assume everybody knows is the 4-2-5 is terrible against the run. And
you're basically losing a box defender.
You're losing a box defender.
So
now you can bring up a safety, right? But it's a safety, not a linebacker.
It's built. This defense is built more to defend the spread type offenses. A true power running game, it's not built for that.
That's right, and it struggled against LSU.
Right.
And did you see Alabama rush the ball against LSU last week?
Yeah, I mean,
it was pretty.
They were able to run the ball. That's for sure.
Let's just look at some of the. This is what I want to talk about: the opponent's rushing yards per game this year. Washington State, who throws the ball 75 times a game, rushed for 120 yards in the first game. I'll give that one to you.
That's first game. First game.
I'll give it to you.
Okay.
Mississippi State rushed for 138. That's all right. They run that spread type offense. Arkansas. Mississippi State ran 202. That's a little concerning, but you won the game. LSU rushed for 228 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's probably the most similar offense that you faced with the Alabama offense coming up. And you gave up 228 and 4 touchdowns. Now, that's not as alarming to me as the last 2 weeks. Arkansas rushed for 222 and a touchdown, and Tennessee rushed for 226. They don't have a quarterback. All they do is run the ball, and they rush for 226. With Auburn knowing that they're going to run.
I'm not going to disagree with you on that.
I'm just saying
there are issues with Auburn's rushing defense.
Even if Auburn can score 30 points, can they stop an Alabama offense?
I don't know. The answer to that, I don't know. But I think the key thing that people are missing here, I think everyone just assumes that Alabama's going to be able to stop Auburn's offense. I'm not sure that's the case. We don't know that at this point. I mean, they were the past couple of years. But last year was the Scott Loeffler disaster. That shouldn't even count. And the year before that, you had a very, very young offensive line.
I'm not even looking at the previous Auburn-Alabama matchups. I'm looking at Alabama's defense this year. When have they struggled? They struggled against Texas A&M.
Sure.
Johnny Manziel's throwing the ball everywhere.
Sure.
Where else have they struggled?
They haven't really played a team that's running the ball like Auburn is.
Arkansas is only built on the run. Tennessee is built on the run. They had 220 yards against Auburn. They rushed for like 60 yards against Alabama.
Okay.
I mean, the Alabama's rushing defense is pretty intense. Ole Miss rushes the ball like Auburn. It's not the same system, but it's similar, and they got goose-egged.
I would argue that Auburn's offensive line is better than any of those teams, though.
I can agree with that. I'm not saying Auburn's not going to score at all. But if you're talking about an Alabama team against an Auburn defense, they're going to score. I think they're going to score at least 35 points. So if you're Auburn, you have to score at least 35 points and as many as you can. And I don't think they can do that just running the ball.
I don't think they're going to just run the ball, though. I think Auburn is fully capable of passing.
Okay, with Nick Marshall?
With Nick Marshall, yes.
And we've got that on record.
Yes, with Nick yes, we have that on record. Overall, his statistics have not been great.
Yes.
But lots of long passes for touchdowns. Sammy Coates, wheel routes. The completion percentage is probably not there, but if Alabama does have a weakness to exploit, it's the secondary.
It is. Okay, so you're talking about 4 long passes a game.
Right.
Best case scenario, that's 21 points.
Okay.
For 4 long passes a game. Let's say you score 2 more touchdowns, you're at 34 points.
I think you score more than 2 rushing touchdowns, though.
Okay, now I'm so glad that we have this on radio.
Yeah.
So you say that Auburn will score more than 2 rushing touchdowns against Alabama.
Absolutely.
I will take that bet every single day.
Okay.
And we're on air, so I'm going to take that side of the argument.
I'm not saying at this point that Auburn's going to win that game.
I
think it's going to be very competitive.
If the number is 2, I will take under every single day on how many rushing touchdowns they'll score. But let's talk about this real quick. I'm going to put the number at 14.5 points. You're going under. That Alabama will win by. Margin of victory.
14.5.
14.5.
Yeah, I'm going under 14.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to do. The official outputting our... You don't go to Vegas. The official outputting our covered line is going to be 14.5 points. We've got to find a way to get this on our poll somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I think the fact that you're underestimating here is just the fact that Auburn has been destroyed by Alabama the past couple of years. It's at home. There's a lot of mitigating factors here.
I think you're putting too much on emotion. Emotion plays heavily into a game in the first and third quarters, and then physicality comes in the second and fourth.
Okay.
And I don't think Auburn this year has the horses to run with Alabama.
I think they do.
We will find out.
We will. We'll see. It's going to be a great game.
And we're going to have this similar conversation for the next 2 weeks.
And I might be wrong. I might be wrong, but I feel relatively confident enough to say these things right now.
All right. Well, we'll see. And we'll talk about this next week.
Yeah, we will. Well, there's plenty more. We will break down everything. We got 2 weeks to talk about it, David.
That's going to be so much fun.
It's going to be nuts.
Yeah.
But we've run out of time for today, though.
We have. We got to hurry up and give them our song.
Okay, we're going to give you the song. Make sure you come back next week. More Iron Bowl talk. It's going to be awesome. This is Outputting Our Coverage. We'll see you later.